Hi, and welcome to this guided voiceover of my head sculpting process. This is less of a tutorial. Well, you could look at it as a tutorial. I'll be going over the tools that I use, but it won't be any specific detail like other sculpting tutorials, like I previously have one where it's an introduction to ZBrush. Here I will mostly be going over my process. So as you can see here, I'm starting off by just roughly shaping in the shape of a head. And I usually mask out the neck area and just use the move tool to pull it back. I use the move tool a lot in the beginning, more than any other brush, and eventually I'll go over to using the trim dynamic brush and the clay build-up brush. Now this video is sped up by 100%, so that's twice as fast, meaning that the playtime has been cut in half. I think this video is about 1 hour, cut down to something around a half an hour. And, well, you'll see that by the end. This is some old footage though, this is why I'm doing a voiceover. It's just me recording how I go through sculpting a head. And I'm trying this time-lapsed voiceover just one time now. And if you guys like it, I might do some more. If you guys don't, leave some feedback, and maybe I'll just go back to doing the real-time, tutorial talk where I record all my voice during the process when I'm making the model instead of afterwards. So yeah, in the beginning here, I'm just trying to make like a basic head shape, helmet kind of head. I used the trim dynamic to make planes on the face, and I use the clay brush to kind of start defining some features. And I'm just filling in the bottom part of the bust. I usually end at the clavicle area, maybe a little bit down, and sometimes I include shoulders, sometimes I don't. Depends really on how much I can be bothered with. It's nice often to cut it off a bit before. Now I don't have all the footage for this head sculpt, so some of it will be missing. I will be taking it to detail later. I have already worked more on it than I will show in this video, but it's a good starting point for you to start with your head sculpting if you haven't done it before. Now I'm looking at reference on the side. Nothing specific, it's not an actor or anything, just a bunch of pictures of people's faces that I find appealing. I think it's like a 40, 50-year-old man. I usually like to start out with a crude face, and then if I want him to look younger, I'll make him younger by smoothing out details and curves and stuff like that. Some people like to do it the other way, they like to make him look young first, but I really feel like I get all the anatomy right when I have more features to base my proportions on and stuff. So here you can see I'm roughing out the eyes. I'm using the clay build-up brush to just dig in towards the eyes and try to define the skull through the skin. I always over exaggerate when I make my skull anatomy. It'll look really weird for a while, and then I fill in the fats and the muscles afterwards. So eventually, in the beginning, I'm trying to go for a mix between a skull and the face. I don't really go all the way and make a skull, because then I'll have to fill in a lot, which I really don't need to, but I make a mix between the skull and the face, and it usually helps me get the proportions right and to know where all the bones would protrude and stuff like that. It's really a personal process. I've done many different ways of sculpting heads. Sometimes I do it very strictly with measuring, sometimes I do it by hand, I measure afterwards. Some people would say it's really important to do all your measuring first and you'll save a lot of time, but sometimes I feel like I get caught up in all the measuring and I actually waste a bunch of time, and I can just as well change it later. And I'm just making some marks here and there that will help me see where the face is gonna go. When I look at this after the fact, I can easily see, you know, where I wanna change things. But when I'm sculpting, I don't see them right away. It takes me a little, like, I need to take a step back and stuff and put in some features. So in this sculpt, I don't use many tricks. It's very basic, just clay build up for most of it. Here, as you can see how I do my mouth. Just build up a little, like, bump, and then I use the Damien standard brush to just crease it in. And just make a line, really. That's all I need to make for now. And here I can I'm starting to realize all the proportions are all a bit weird. So I try to, like, crease in the face and stuff to make it a bit smaller face compared to the skull. I usually always get surprised when I actually look at reference and I really, like, analyze it and try to separate the elements. I really get surprised of how big the back of the skull really is compared to the face. Like, the face is often quite small. You've got people all kinds of different sizes, but very often I see that I make the face too big compared to the skull, and I realize later, and I, like, squeeze it in. So I'm still doing my proportions. I think I'm going back to now, like, detailing in a little bit more of the skull, moving the eyes back a bit, just making sure that every angle looks fine. Now, here's one way of making eyes. I have another way where I put a sphere in there, and I just Dynamesh merge it in. That's another technique that I have. Now here I'm putting in a sphere, but I only think that I use this for the eye itself, for the eyeball. I don't think I actually merge it in. Yeah, pretty sure, yeah. So I use it on one side first to see how I should fill in, and because if it's covering both sides, it can be a bit annoying when you're sculpting over it, if you don't want to have on the X-ray mode. So here I'm trying to fill in the bone that goes from your cheek back to your ear, and going back to the eyes again, and just filling in tissue, mostly going a bit more away from I'll be going a bit more away from the skull now. Shape, I'll be going more to, like, making an actual face instead of just a weird shape. I often read Dynamesh when I get to this kind of phase. Dynamesh is really nice to just reconstruct your geometry, but you'll often realize that it'll dampen all your details, so you shouldn't go too much into detail when you're working here. I think as you can see here, I'm like, oh, it's crumbing up my details too much, so I increase the resolution of the Dynamesh a little bit more at this point. I usually do that when I get to the eyes, ears, and mouth part of the process. And it always, to me, like, when I look at my sculptures, after, if I look at the video of me sculpting, or like a time-lapse in ZBrush, I always feel like what was I doing at this certain point? It didn't look like a face at all, but it just takes a bit of work for me. Like I said, I'd use about an hour to sculpt a head, and this is, I'd say, 15 minutes into the video. Like real time, maybe, yeah, 10-15 minutes. So, you know, some people use more, some people use less. I've seen some people be really fast, and if you use, like, a base head, you can get a nice head going in like 20 minutes. But, you know, it's not cheating, but it's cheating if you're measuring how fast you can make a base head, because you would already have one, obviously. So for the ears, I have a technique that I like to use. I usually, like, make the ear and then merge it in, but here I'm just straight up sculpting it out, and I'm masking and just doing it the brute force way, as I would like to call it. Masking, moving, inflating, just to get that like indentation on the back. Inflate is really nice for ears usually, but don't make it too much because it looks like you have some sort of like allergy going on and it's just puffy face, but it should be easy to solve. And using perspective is also really clever, smart sometimes to do, because I usually sculpt my beginnings without the perspective in order to get the proportions right, but it all looks sort of weird sometimes until I like turn the perspective on and I realize, oh, okay, you know, a little bit of perspective always helps. You don't have to add too much. It should look okay in both ways, but it'll always look a bit weird in the orthographic view. And yeah, now I've gotten to the face where it, you know, it's kind of got the shape of a guy, but it's not like completely good yet. I'll get there when I copy the eyes and stuff, and I can tell that the head is like, he has a big brain at this moment. And I will change stuff like that later. The head you see in the thumbnail is about an hour extra work after the one that I'm done with this. And it's just because I lost a lot of the footage. Basically an hour got corrupted, there was a crash, and for some reason my recording software crashed because of it as well. But you'll get the main point of the sculpture in this one. I mean, really the result that I have at the end of this hour is like more than good enough to be considered to call a human sculpt. It's just I changed the character and I polypaint him towards the last hour of the sculpture, and that's why it looks different. You can see it at the end of this video. There will be a picture of him there, of the result. Well, so far results. I will take this head further in another video where I'll do wrinkle detailing and all that to really like sell the photorealism and not just sculpting a head shape. Because this video will end at me just having a head shape really roughed out. You can still see like clay tubes everywhere and stuff. So here I'm using a lot of Dam Standard. I use the alternate version a lot to like crease eyelids and such. Not in this video, but in another video I might upload how I make the eye holes and the eye bag for like Z-remesher. I have that footage. That's a piece of footage where I just cut out the eye holes and I cut out the mouth and I use Z-remesher to get like an okay mesh to continue sculpting details on and stuff. Which can be a bit of a tedious process. It can take some time and you can like... It's not nice to have in a sculpting video because it will take like half the video and nothing will really happen. Only thing will happen is me changing the underlying mesh, which is important if you really want to build up the details. So at this point it's kind of like this Deadpool from the Wolverine movie look I usually go for, because the mouth was like making me confused, and I took it away. It's much more easier to look at a flat surface than to look at something that's wrong for me. And I'm just going in, I think I'm really looking at reference now to figure out like what kind of character am I looking for, and he had this very like V shape in his muscles above his eyes. Now I haven't taken a lot of anatomy really. I've looked at anatomy and I've like tried to sculpt anatomy, but I haven't taken the time to learn all the words. So especially for facial anatomy, I don't have all the technical linguistics abilities about all the facial structures, but it helps to know it a little bit, like what it would look like, at least for me. I think it's important to know your anatomy, but not by words, but at least by shape and placement and stuff. Some people have a good aid from knowing the words as well, though. And some people make the eyes, they go inwards, but I like them to go out like they actually do, because that's what's defining the shape. If they go inwards, you can get nicer renders off of a clay render. If they go outwards, you often get a dead look in the eye with a clay render, but the shape of the eye will be much more realistic. So when you put an actual eye render in there, like with double lenses and iris and all that, it'll look correct. So that's why I do the bump out instead of in like many sculptors like to do. I'm not. The point of this sculpture is not to have a clay maquette, but just to